Hello, everybody. Welcome to Teaching Writing in College, where the driving question is, how can instructors in higher education leverage theory, science, pedagogy, and craft most effectively to help their learners with writing? And I'm excited about today's episode. Looks like I forgot to title this slide, but I thought that I could just give a report of what I did last week or some of the highlights of last week, and also fulfill a promise to share my AI policy, which I think I did on the previous one or two episodes. And I also want to start thinking about some of the things that some goals that I've set for myself to improve in terms of my teaching. And so I have my AI policy, of course, and then my classroom coaching report. A few episodes ago, I talked about how I would like to know more about how, athletic trainers and coaches talk to their athletes, and maybe I could translate some of that into the classroom just to help motivate my own students. So I'd like to talk about that. I also have a little bit of an update to the Cornell notes, which I think ties into the coaching report. And one of the main questions there is simply, did I do well? I set out to try to be consistent with my energy in the classroom and just kind of the motivating language, the way that I talk to students. I just want to kind of keep that high. I think one of the things that I do is I assume that, after I've set the stage of the first one or two class periods, that after that it's just self-understood that, students should take notes and I should just present my slides and things. But what I want to do instead is sort of just kind of convey an enthusiasm for that, and maybe just a little bit more detail on, what I'm looking for in the notes, just consistently as time goes on. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Let's see, nuts and bolts of teaching. When I gave my AI policy presentation last week, I ran into just a little bit of a hiccup as I was presenting it to students, and I am going to correct that in this episode. And then also maybe I can talk a little bit about the upcoming week, where I want to work on getting student buy-in with a skill called Detect, Elect, Connect, and also setting more classroom expectations. And so we'll get to those things as we go. So I thought I would start with the AI policy, and that would be right here. And so here it is. I'm just going to go ahead and read it. I've had a chance to look at the GCU, Grand Canyon University AI policy. They just came out with a new one for the start of this academic year. And I think I said on the podcast that I wanted to make sure that mine was in line with that before I actually use it, and I've had a chance to evaluate that, and I think it is. And so here's my policy for writing and Gen AI, just kind of a generic document that I'll give to all my students in all of my classes going forward. Here it is: Policies for Writing and Gen AI, Dr. Skeen, instructor. Background: the widespread availability of generative artificial intelligence using large language models has undoubtedly changed the way people approach writing in personal, academic, and professional circumstances. These changes, though, are not new because they already have precedence. Technologies such as word processors, the internet, instant messaging, and social media have all changed the way we approach writing, and similar debates we are having today about using artificial intelligence for writing also took place when earlier technologies were introduced. And then I have a rationale. Rationale for classroom policies vis-a-vis Gen AI. The central goal of any writing course should be to empower learners to make sound judgments about writing and communication. Since Gen AI can be a tool for writing and communication, learning how it works, what it might do well, and what it might not do well are all important. However, studies are also showing that the use of Gen AI to complete tasks can result in cognitive offloading, removing opportunities for the mind to process cognitive tasks that would otherwise lead to learning. Further, in some real-world instances, the use of Gen AI to communicate can lead to unforeseen and unpleasant consequences. The following policies are meant to maximize student learning. And then a section for the policies. I've got 7 bullet points here. First one: student learning about writing is the top priority. Dr. Skeen's goal is always to help students get the education they deserve. Students' acquisition of a robust set of skills for communication and knowledge about communication is the central focus of Dr. Skeen's writing courses. Learning about writing skills in class will first take place without the use of Gen AI. After a given writing skill has been introduced, class time will be devoted intermittently to practicing the given skill both with and without the aid of Gen AI. AI should not be used for the purpose of cognitive offloading, delegating important skills, or decision-making to Gen AI. And it looks like bullet point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. While using AI, the goal for larger projects is to practice adapting skills from class and then put those skills on display by mimicking how those skills might appear in the real world. And then 7th and final bullet point. Students' primary objective is to use their knowledge about writing to produce documents that function well for their intended purpose. Gen AI can play a supporting role. And then just a little bit at the end here. Remember, writing courses are meant to support your endeavors in your other classes and in your anticipated career. One hallmark of a good communicator is one who can meet audience expectations in a nuanced and meaningful way, and Dr. Skeen's writing courses are designed to help you be successful at that. So that's my policy that I've given to students. Maybe just a couple of observations here. One is that this first bullet point that I have for the list of bulleted policies, Dr. Skeen's goal is always to help students get the education they deserve. I've kind of turned that into almost a class motto of some kind. I had students repeat it, and I kind of cheered them on about that. So Dr. Skeen's goal is always to help students get the education they deserve. And so I repeat that to them, and I say, Dr. Skeen's goal is always to help students get the education they what? Then I have all the students say in unison, deserve. And if I don't hear everybody say it, I have them say it again, to kind of get everybody to say it. Because I do think every student deserves a good education, and we don't want AI, of course, to compromise that. So that's an important thing, and that's an easy way to emphasize that to them, help them remember it. Another thing is that kind of embedded in these policies are the looper, the looper framework that I came up with over the summer. And so I'm going to want to introduce that to them when we do start experimenting with AI more in the classroom. And so learn, use, practice, and reflect. I think I'm just going to use that, introduce that to them, see how it goes. Once again, it just kind of keeps it's a way for them to kind of remember what's in the policy. I just want them to get used to thinking about the policy. And so I've got the document here at the beginning, but I am going to bring it up kind of in my coaching mentality. I might mention looper, or I might say they get the education they deserve, or, just to be our best, we want to use looper or something like that as the semester goes on. And so when I'm talking to students, I have ideas that I want to convey to them in short, easy ways, memorable ways that reflect what's in the policy. And every once in a while, we'll come back to the policy too. That presentation that I showed in the podcast, I think last episode, about my lesson plan about AI is one instance of that. And I'm going to want to keep following up with that. And so I'll share that as the podcast goes on as well. But there's the policy. Let's see, what else do we have? We have the classroom coaching report. How did you feel, Dr. Skeen or Tom? How did you feel about your actual coaching in the classroom and how you are communicating with students? I feel like I did pretty good. I tried to be more consistent than I usually am. And so that was good. One of the things that I did, I kind of took on the persona of one of my favorite athletic trainers on the exercise bike that we have at home. I may have talked about that on the podcast, but he always kind of warms the audience up by, since it's an exercise bike, he rehearses the 3 positions that he uses and talks about how he's going to be changing things. The series the trainer is Gideon Akande, if anybody happens to have a Nordic Trek bike and the iFit app that goes with it. The trainer is Gideon Akande, and the series, and he does this in all of his, he's got a few different series, but one is called Well-Rounded, being a well-rounded athlete. And so he uses that as a theme. But at the beginning, he always warms the athletes up by rehearsing the positions and then taking about 30 seconds or a minute in each position. he says, don't worry about how fast your legs are moving. He doesn't put on any resistance or anything. It's just get yourself ready. And so first position is sitting. Second position is kind of more of a standing march. And then the third position is the kind of position you would assume if you have a headwind, where you put the body low and the hips back and things like that. And so just to kind of warm the body up and get it ready. So I told students about that and just talked about how that's important. You have to have that kind of a mindset where you're continually checking your form. And if you do that, you can be successful. And then another part of the conversation I had was I asked them, what kinds of equipment do they have for the things that they do well, or that they like to do, or that, and it could be, they play an instrument, a musical instrument, or they have a hobby, or maybe they're an athlete or something like that. There's always equipment that goes with these. And, one of the conversations I had, somebody who was a drummer, he and I started talking about, what kind of equipment he likes to use. And he said, I really need a good set of sticks. So I asked, well, what kind of sticks? And he said the heavier ones. And I think he named a brand of sticks. And so we talked about that and how, he's got to be comfortable, and he is comfortable as a musician, and he also performs. But having that right set of drumsticks, the ones that are going to help him the most, that's what he needs. And then we also talked a little bit about form, just that, as a drummer, there is a right way and a wrong way to drum, and, to hit the drums with the sticks and all of that. So we talked about that a little bit. And that was how I introduced them to the Cornell notes on the first day of class. And so I think I have that here too. There it is. And I just have a PowerPoint that I'm going to, just kind of keep in my file so that I can pull it up every class period to get them ready. And so I had students get their notes ready. I did my own handwritten blank set of Cornell notes that I could just show them and put up on the screen like I have up here. And I wanted to make sure that they did some things that I like to know about up there at the top with their name, just their GCU name, their name in the GCU system, so I can find them in the LMS, their nickname, whatever it is they like to be called in class, so that I can learn their name and call them what they'd like to be called, and their major and their career, and also their group number, just so that I can find them, especially early on, get to know who they are. And then I like to have the major and the career in there because, once in a while when I'm passing stuff back to them, we could have a conversation. I'll get to know what they plan on doing and how writing might relate and how stuff we're doing in class might relate to that. And so I like to know those things too. So I gave them that blank one. I also gave them a sample here that I also did on my own, just to show them what it might look like by the end of every class period, and that's how they get their participation credit. And then I also did one. I want to do a little bit more with Cornell notes that I have not done in the past, which is when I have them do things together as a group, oftentimes that falls apart a little bit in the notes or just generally. And so I've decided to be really specific about what I'm looking for there. And so I just have a sample here. I'm calling it a group square, but you can see it on the screen here. So on the left-hand side with the Q, I've got group, and then the lines are for whatever the name of the activity is, because I'll give them an activity and just a brief name for it. And then in the notes section, typically, if they have, 3, 4, or 5 people in their group, especially 4, you can make a little square, name number 1, name number 2, name number 3, name number 4. They can write their group mates' names there, and then everybody contributes one little thing to that. They all take notes on it and just kind of fill out the group square. And so when we do that and just kind of have it systematic in the notes, and they know that that's something I would like from them, then it just gives them a format to follow. And hopefully that just increases the likelihood that they'll stay engaged at least long enough to take the notes. And so I'm going to use this as a way, especially for the first few weeks, just to, give them a moment to get ready for the group square. And then after that, I can probably just say, make a group square, and they'll do that, and then we'll move on. It's just to give them a moment to get ready for that group work. And so what I did really, just kind of in the coaching, it's kind of like with the exercise bike, it's just about, checking form, check how fast you're going. Another thing that my trainer does that I really like is he reminds us to get, to look at our speed, because he'll assign a position, first, second, or third position on the bike, and then he will, raise or lower the incline. He will increase or decrease the resistance, and he'll also give us a speed to work with, and he'll have us check, in a 1 minute interval. He might have us check our speed once in a while. He'll talk to us, he'll coach us, and then he'll remind us, check that speed, make sure you stay on your speed, that you're not going too fast or too slow. And he varies the speed along with things like resistance and incline and the position, and that's how you become well-rounded, because the challenges keep changing. And so with that kind of as an analogy, we can do the same kind of thing with notes. We're going to be taking notes and doing different things with them, but we do have some form. And the reason why I'm doing this, I'm kind of being careful to do this at the beginning of the semester, because one goal that I have for them is that they have readable notes that they can use elsewhere. And I'll be talking with them about this in the near future, and we'll be starting to ask ourselves, as a class, what assignments do they have in their other classes, and how can some of our skills from English 105 be used in those other assignments? And so I do have plans in the near future to bring in, maybe hypothetical assignments from other classes, or bring in questions about what they anticipate using writing for in their future, or where they can, even outside of school, how are they using writing now, and how can our stuff apply? And then just emphasize, you can use these notes in your other classes. These notes aren't just for here, they're for your other classes. Another thing that I said, just kind of on the coaching side, another little catchphrase or motto that I have is English 105 is the rehearsal and everything else is the performance. And I have them repeat that one back to me. English 105 is the rehearsal and everything else is the performance. And so in the notes, it's the opportunity to rehearse the different writing strategies we're going to learn, as far as invention strategies or structuring writing or style, changing genres, all of the stuff that we do, using evidence, all of the stuff that we do in the course. They'll just have a chance to practice it, rehearse it, and then when they get outside, they could use their notes and they could adapt it, and they can ask themselves, what did we say about this in English 105? I see an opportunity to do X, Y, Z in this other assignment that I have. And so I want the notes to be really readable for them. And so the cue is important, and I've been pretty deliberate about reminding them to put something in a cue, and then in their notes, of course, on the right-hand side. So that's what I'd like, is just readable notes that they can use elsewhere. So I'm being pretty careful about that. And then also, another thing that I've done, just being transparent, I'm not quite sure if this falls under coaching, but maybe it does. The idea is that, we have to kind of understand how learning works. And this goes along with my AI policy too, just that I shared some of the studies about effects of technology, whether those effects be related to use of AI, the effects of technology on learning, or other kinds of things like a handwriting study about how the brain does a little bit better when it is learning by taking notes by hand instead. And so that to me, I think is really helpful too. All right, so there we go. And I was pretty consistent with that, I think, through just especially the form this time. A writing class is very different from an exercise class, but I think the analogy holds up pretty well, and I'm just going to try to make sure that I'm consistent with that. I'll have other things to talk with them about, as we go along. But just kind of getting a good start with the notes, I think, is really important, just especially so the notes are very usable for them. That's, I think, an important thing. And also, they get the practice through handwriting, which could lead to better learning. And so that's what I have for that. And what else? Nuts and bolts of teaching AI in my AI policy presentation. And so just some nuts and bolts of teaching. I did feel like I made a little bit of a mistake when I was teaching last time. it was the first day of classes. In some of my classes, I had a little bit of trouble giving the instructions in a way that students could follow easily, which of course is what you want, especially in a live classroom setting like that. And so I think I see where I had a little bit of a teaching hiccup. So I'm going to go back and revisit that for just a moment. So this is what I have on the screen now is my, is it going to move? Oh, it is. Okay. My introduction to my AI policy, and I shared this on the podcast last time, but just briefly, I get down to this point where I'm actually sharing the policy, and then I wanted them to write some scenarios, like you might remember. And so I told some stories. I got to this point where there's some collaborative work. And so the question is what falls within my policy and what falls outside of it. And then I gave them some instructions. I said in groups of 4, each person's going to write a 50-word scenario. Somebody should write one that clearly violates Dr. Skeen's policy. Someone should write one that falls squarely within Dr. Skeen's policy. And at least 2 should fall in some gray area. Maybe it fits Dr. Skeen's policy, maybe it doesn't. So the idea is to write some scenarios. And then I gave them a sample, which I don't think that I had on the podcast. And I thought to myself, you know what, they do need a sample so they know what kind of a thing to write. And so I gave them a sample. After the podcast, I realized that, and so I put the sample in. And so I read the sample to them, and here's what it says. Student completes a discussion question in Halo, that's our learning management system, in an online class in response to something Dr. Skeen wrote. The text includes, "Great job, Tom, you hit the nail right on the head." And I just give them that. We don't evaluate it or anything, but to me it sounds like maybe Gemini wrote it, or maybe ChatGPT, but it's just kind of a strange thing to have, just that the audience, where the professor is getting a comment from a student. It feels like it's kind of violating a boundary somewhere, and so students don't usually tell their professors that they hit the nail right on the head, but so to me it's kind of funny. But the next thing I did, I showed them that sample, and then I had them choose the people within their group. You might remember this. And I asked them the question just to get them ready. Which one person will write that scenario that violates Dr. Skeen's policy? Which one will write the scenario that falls squarely within? Which 2 people will write the one or ones that may not conform to Dr. Skeen's policy? And then I gave them the policy again. Another adjustment I did make was that I put my sample scenario in yellow, as you can see it here, where I've got the policies, the bullet points over on the left. I've got my sample over there on the right. And what I'm trying to do, and it's highlighted in yellow, and I gave all that to them. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to sort of take the load off of their working memory so that they can spend more time thinking about what the scenario is that they want to write, instead of trying to remember so much what the policy is or what to do. And so they've got that, or what theirs should look like. And so I've got those things that they don't necessarily have to use their working memory for now, because it's up on the screen for them. But at this point, when I did this, sometimes I would get questions from students, just wondering once again what to do, and could you clarify this for me? And so I started to get questions right around this point. And I figured one way that I think might help that, because it is really kind of a new thing to them, suddenly I'm asking them to write a scenario, and they're not quite sure coming into class what to expect. And, they're wondering what the teacher's expectations are. And they were not familiar with the activity. And so I thought, there's more that I could do. I tried to relieve their working memory, which I think is a good step, but I think it would help even more if I had them, just have an opportunity to think about a scenario in a little more detail. And so I think one thing that I could have done that would have been helpful is when I was back here with the sample, I'm going to try to change this right now. I'm going to take a slide and I'm going to add it. First, I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to show them my sample, but then I'm going to have them evaluate it. And so let's see, how can I do this? I'm going to, for now, we're going to just do a quick thinking activity. And just in their cue, I'll have them write, evaluate a scenario, just so that they have an opportunity to think about it in a little more detail. So cue, evaluate a scenario. And I'm going to take this off. There we go. Student completes a discussion question in Halo in an online class in response to something Dr. Skeen wrote. The text includes, "Great job, Tom. You hit the nail right on the head." Their response sounded just like Gemini. And so then I'll put, does this violate the policy? And give them an opportunity to answer that briefly, maybe in just one sentence or so. It doesn't have to be a lot. But here I am spontaneously trying to change this lesson. Trying to change this lesson plan on the podcast. But we'll see how it goes. And unfortunately, I can't use this one. Well, I can use it next semester as I introduce policies to students. But I want to do this now so that I don't forget. Let's see. Does this follow? And maybe just in the parentheses there, one sentence. And so that'll give them a chance, to just engage with a scenario and engage in a way that is related to evaluating the scenario against the policy. And then I think if I do that with that little bit of extra experience, I think it's going to make it a little bit clearer for them that I'm asking them to write a scenario, in the slides right after this one. And so that would be another way for me to maybe help them get ready, to prepare them for what's coming, because, sometimes when we get some sort of new activity that we're not expecting, it is a little bit confusing. And I know that I've had that happen to me as a student, and hopefully this will work better. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'm going to remember to report on this again next semester after I have a chance to try it out. But that's where I think I can improve my teaching a little bit, make it just a little bit better for the students in this particular case. All right, let's see what else is there. Okay. The other thing that I have is just in the upcoming week, I feel a sense of urgency right now to get buy-in from students. There's a skill that I like to call detect, elect, connect. I think I've talked about it briefly on the podcast before. I got this from David Perkins and Gabrielle Solomon. I think it was in an article they wrote in Educational Psychology, the journal Educational Psychology in 2012. If I have everything remembered right, I'll put this in the show notes, but if I remember right, it was Educational Psychology. The year was 2012. It was a special issue on learning transfer. And there I think they gave this detect, elect, connect framework. And I borrowed that and I brought it right into the classroom because I think it's really helpful for students. It's a way just to remember what to do. We learn all about this stuff in English 105, and then outside of English 105, you have to detect opportunities to use it, elect or decide, choose to use skills from English 105 in my case, or decide which skills to use. So you can elect to do it. You can also elect, I guess, in air quotes, which skills to use, and then connect those skills to that new task. And so it just gives them a way to think about that. It gives me a reminder, it's something to remember, it becomes something that we learned in English 105. One of the moves you got to make is you've got to detect, elect, and connect. And so having them learn that just along with vocabulary about writing and skills about writing, I think that's really important too. And so I want to do that this week. This is just week 2. Everything's fresh. Most of my students just got here to the university and it's still really early. And so I think it's a good time to just show them the usefulness of what we're doing so that they feel more invested. So that's my goal, one of my goals this week. Another goal that I have is to set classroom expectations because, we've got the notes and I'm going to want them to have a really nice, neat set of notes, which I think will be really important. And as time goes on, everybody's going to relax a little bit and it's going to, get a little bit easier to sort of get off track, with talking to other students in the class and things like that. And I like them to have those conversations. I definitely want them to make friends. And I don't mean to squelch that, because I know that those friendships will be important to them. But then also, just if I can, kind of keep them so that they stay willing to come back to order, when it's time to move on and do something else as well. I think that's really important. So, because I like to use hand signals, that we have a thing called Lopes Up that we do here at GCU with our antelope. And I like to do that to, kind of bring everybody back so that we can then start a classroom discussion if I gave them an opportunity to discuss or work on something together. But then, so I use that, but then sometimes it still takes a little time. And as the semester wears on, I'm going to give the Lopes Up signal to try to call everybody back to attention after an activity. And it will take longer and longer for everybody to kind of come back together. And so I'm going to try to do what I can to keep that a little bit shorter so that it's a little bit easier to cover material. It's a little bit easier to stay on track and to stay focused. And so those are the things that I'm working on right now. And so we'll see how it goes this week. I also want to talk a little bit more about rhetorical analysis with them. And I have something about that too for the podcast. And so I'll get that set up as well. Some of that's going to happen this week. But that's all I have from now. I hope everything's going well for you. I really appreciate your listening, and that's about all that I have. I'll do the show notes. I forgot to put together a slide for my socials and stuff, but you may know what those are. But in the show notes, I'll make sure that I get to that article by David Perkins and Gabrielle Solomon. I think that's it, the 2012 educational psychology one. So that's a really good one to look out for Detect, Elect, Connect. So thank you so much. I appreciate your listening, and I will talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.